I turned into a small roadside diner that still had its lights on. We sat by the window. That's when she came over, the waitress. We'd been sitting for maybe 10 minutes when a man came out from the kitchen, mid-50s, slick gray hair, clean shirt, and the posture of someone who carried authority like armor. He walked straight toward her. "Can we talk, Megan?" he said, voice low but sharp. "You're late again," he said. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carver, No. You said that last time. Please, my mom's been. I can't keep doing this, Megan. You're done here." Dylan looked at me. "Dad, did she just get fired?" "Yeah," I said quietly. There was a pause. I heard the sound of something small hitting the floor, maybe her pen. Then his shoes clicking back toward the kitchen, leaving her standing there, pale and shaking. She didn't say a word, just took off her apron, folded it, and walked out the front door. By the time autumn came back around, the restaurant had settled into its rhythm again, steady, alive, familiar. The chalkboard menu by the door changed with the season. Cinnamon pancakes in the morning, stew, and apple crumble at night. The kind of food that makes you exhale after the first bite. Dylan had shot up almost 3 inches that summer. His shoes left muddy prints by the counter every afternoon, and I'd stopped bothering to clean them right away. They were proof that he still came by after school, that he still felt this place was his too. As for Megan, she wasn't the girl I'd met outside that diner anymore. She'd grown into herself, steady and self-assured, but still with that quiet humility that made people feel safe. Customers didn't just ask for her, they waited for her. She'd tell them stories about her mom's favorite songs, or how she used to count bus stops to stay awake during night shifts. People listened, not out of politeness, but because her words carried the kind of truth you don't get from screens or headlines. One Friday night, after the dinner rush, she came into my office holding a manila envelope. "You got a minute?" "Always," I said. She handed it to me. Inside was a college acceptance letter. "Culinary school, full scholarship. I applied months ago," she said nervously. "Didn't think I'd get in." For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I just looked at the paper and then at her. "Megan, that's incredible." She smiled, then hesitated. "It's in Chicago. I'd have to move." There it was, the bittersweet part of every good story. The one you know is coming, but still hits you like a cold wind. "When do you leave?" I asked. "Classes start in January," she said. "I wanted to tell you early." I nodded slowly. "You should go." Her brows furrowed. "You're not even going to try to talk me out of it." "No," I said. "You've earned the right to chase something better." Her eyes glistened. "I wouldn't even be here if it weren't for you." I shook my head. "You were already here. You just needed someone to remind you." The next few weeks were a blur of normalcy, laced with unspoken countdowns. Megan kept working like nothing had changed, still punctual, still laughing, still taking care of everyone. But I could see it in the way she lingered by the window after closing, the way her smile sometimes faltered when she looked at the chalkboard menu she'd helped design. One evening, she found me fixing a loose hinge on the front door. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you ever regret anything?" I sat back on my heels. "Every day, but I try not to let regrets stick around too long. They don't pay rent." She smiled faintly. "I used to regret everything. Every mistake, every job I lost, every time I couldn't be there for my mom. But now," she trailed off. "Now what?" I asked. "Now I think maybe all that had to happen for me to end up here." I looked at her then, really looked, and thought about how life circles back on itself in ways we never plan. December rolled in, sharp and cold. The city dressed itself in lights, and the restaurant turned cozy again, wreath on the door, pine scent in the air. On Megan's last night, the crew threw her a small farewell dinner. Cheryl baked a pie shaped like a heart, Louise grilled steaks, and Dylan made a card that said, "You're the best thing that ever happened to Fry's." When she walked in and saw the setup, she covered her face with her hands and cried. Not loud, not messy, just quiet tears of gratitude. We ate, we laughed, we told stories about the first time she burned toast or tripped carrying a tray. Then, when everyone left, I walked her to the door. The street outside was dusted with snow, glowing under the amber streetlight. She turned to me and said, "You ever think about that night? The one when you found me outside the diner?" "Every once in a while," I said. "What made you come back for me?" I couldn't stop thinking about how unfair it felt. And I didn't want to be the kind of man who notices someone drowning and keeps walking. She smiled through her tears. "Then I guess I was lucky you were hungry that night." I laughed. "Yeah, guess we both were." We stood there in the cold for a moment that felt longer than it really was. Then she said, "You know what the hardest part is?" "What's that?" "Leaving a place that finally feels like home." I didn't have an answer for that. I just hugged her. A real, solid hug that said everything words couldn't. "Go make something beautiful," I told her. "I will," she whispered. "Because you showed me how." After she left, the restaurant felt quieter. Not empty, just different. Her name stayed on the chalkboard menu for months, even after I tried erasing it. The chalk would fade, but somehow, faint outlines of her handwriting always came back. In time, she started sending postcards. Pictures of Chicago streets, notes about classes, new recipes, a few lines about missing the smell of our kitchen. She signed every one the same way. "Still learning. Still grateful. M." One day, Dylan asked, "Do you think she'll come back?" I looked at the photo on my office corkboard, the whole staff grinning in front of the grill, Megan in the middle, sunlight catching her hair. "I hope so," I said. "But even if she doesn't, she's part of this place forever." Months later, I found myself locking up after a long shift. The dining room was dark, chairs stacked, counters clean. I stood in the quiet and listened, not for sounds, but for what they left behind. The hum of the fridge, the faint echo of laughter still living in the walls. That's when I realized something. Sometimes saving someone doesn't mean pulling them out of the fire. It means giving them a place to rest long enough to remember who they are. And sometimes, the person you save ends up saving you from the loneliness you didn't even realize had settled in your bones. They say some faces stay with you, even when you never meant to remember them. For me, it was a face framed by the dim neon light of a diner window. Tired, young, and trying to hold itself together while the world chipped away piece by piece. That night wasn't supposed to be anything special, just another Tuesday. I'd closed up my restaurant later than usual. Paperwork, inventory, fixing a leaking sink that had been giving me trouble all week. By the time I picked up my son, Dylan, from his after-school program, it was already close to 9. He was half asleep in the back seat, his hair messy, backpack falling off the seat. When I asked if he was hungry, he mumbled, "Fries, please. The crispy kind." I could have just driven home and made something quick, but the kid had been patient all day, waiting for me. So I turned into a small roadside diner that still had its lights on. The kind of place that looked the same no matter what town you were in. Flickering sign, worn leather booths, smell of grease and coffee that had been sitting too long on a burner. We sat by the window. Dylan swung his legs under the table while I tried to answer a few messages from the restaurant staff. That's when she came over, the waitress. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, her apron a little crooked, like she'd been running behind. But she had this soft, steady voice when she asked for our order, the kind that makes even a tired man feel noticed for a second. "Fries for him, coffee for you?" she asked with a half smile. "Yeah," I said. "And maybe a grilled cheese if the kitchen's still open." "It's always open for comfort food," she replied. There was something in her eyes, not flirtation, not sadness, just weariness trying to pretend it wasn't there. I noticed her hands trembled slightly when she set down the cups. We'd been sitting for maybe 10 minutes when a man came out from the kitchen, mid-50s, slick gray hair, clean shirt, and the posture of someone who carried authority like armor. He walked straight toward her. "Can we talk, Megan?" he said, voice low but sharp. They stepped a few feet away, near the coffee station. I tried not to listen, but his voice carried over the hum of the diner. "You're late again," he said. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carver, No, you said that last time. Please, my mom's been. I can't keep doing this, Megan. You're done here." There was a pause. I heard the sound of something small hitting the floor, maybe her pen. Then his shoes clicking back toward the kitchen, leaving her standing there, pale and shaking. She didn't say a word, just took off her apron, folded it, and walked out the front door. Dylan looked at me. "Dad, did she just get fired?" "Yeah," I said quietly. He frowned. "That's not fair." I didn't answer. I just sipped my coffee, though it had already gone cold. We finished our meal in silence. I paid the bill and left a tip big enough to feel like a protest. When we stepped outside, the air was cold, that kind of early winter chill that bites your fingertips. I spotted her right away, sitting by the trash bins near the back alley, her head buried in her arms. For a second, I hesitated. I had my kid with me. I didn't want to intrude or make her feel worse. But something about that sight, A young woman falling apart under a streetlight hit something in me I couldn't ignore. Dylan, wait by the car, okay? He nodded and climbed in, still watching me through the window. I walked over slowly. Hey, I said. Are you all right? She looked up, startled, wiping her face with her sleeve. Her eyes were red, and her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm fine. I just lost my job. That's all. She tried to laugh it off, but her chin trembled. Mind if I ask why? She hesitated, then said, My mom's sick. I've been taking her to the hospital every few days. I live across town, and the buses don't always run late. I've been trying to make it on time, but... Her voice broke. I guess trying isn't enough. I nodded. I didn't know what to say. She didn't want pity, and I didn't want to give empty words. After a few seconds, she stood up. Sorry, she said. You don't even know me. I shouldn't dump this on you. It's okay, I said. I know what it's like to juggle too much. She gave a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. Thanks, she whispered, then walked down the block and disappeared around the corner. I stood there for a moment, hands in my pockets, watching the taillights fade into the wet asphalt reflection. Then I went back to the car. Dylan was quiet for most of the ride home. About halfway, he said, Dad, do you think she's going to be okay? I glanced at him in the mirror. I don't know, buddy. I hope so. But deep down, I wasn't sure. And somehow, I couldn't shake her face from my mind. The way she tried to smile through breaking. That night, I lay awake long after Dylan fell asleep. The rain started tapping against the window. Somewhere between the sound of the wind and the ticking clock, I decided one thing. I wasn't done with that story yet. Hillside Medical sat on the east side of town, a flat, aging complex that smelled of antiseptic and tired hope. I'd been there once before, years ago, when my ex-wife's mother had surgery. It wasn't the kind of place anyone came to without worry in their chest. The parking lot was half empty, puddles reflecting the gray sky. I walked through the automatic doors, the kind that hiss open like they're reluctant to let the outside world in. Inside, the light was too bright, humming softly overhead. The nurses at the reception desk looked up briefly, then back down at their screens. I didn't have a plan, just a direction. Find a young woman with tired eyes named Megan, probably sitting by a hospital bed that's seen too many visiting hours. I approached the reception desk, clearing my throat. Hi, I said. I'm looking for a patient. Not sure about the last name, but her daughter's name is Megan. She's about 20. The nurse glanced up, skeptical. We can't share patient information, sir. I understand, I said. Could I maybe leave a note for her? She hesitated. If you write it down, I can see if it gets to her. I scribbled my name, restaurant address, and number, adding a short line. If you're still looking for work, I might have something for you. The nurse took the note without comment. I thanked her and turned to leave, feeling foolish for thinking I could just show up and make things right. But just as I reached the exit, I heard someone call out, Sir? Excuse me, sir. I turned. It was a man in scrubs holding my note. Behind him stood Megan, wearing a faded green hoodie, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She looked different without the diner uniform, smaller somehow, like the exhaustion had finally caught up with her. You left this? She asked softly. I did, I said. I didn't mean to bother you. She shook her head, blinking fast. No, you didn't bother me. I just didn't expect anyone. We stepped aside near a vending machine humming in the corner. She looked down, fidgeting with the sleeve of her hoodie. You really own a restaurant? Yeah. Kiln Street Grill, over on Maple. Her eyes widened slightly. I know that place. My mom loves your pancakes. She used to take me there on Sundays before, her voice caught. Before she got sick. How's she doing? I asked carefully. Not great, she said. They're trying a new treatment, but it's expensive. I've been picking up shifts wherever I can. The diner was close to the bus stop. It helped. I nodded. That man shouldn't have talked to you like that. She gave a small, humorless smile. He's not a bad person. He just doesn't have time for excuses. There was something about the way she said it. No bitterness, just resignation. I recognized that tone. It's the sound of someone who's learned to expect disappointment. I cleared my throat. Look, I could use someone like you. The hours are flexible, and I can make sure you get mornings free if you need to help your mom. It's not charity, it's a real job. You've got the right attitude, and that's hard to find. She stared at me like she was waiting for a catch. Why would you do that? Because someone once did it for me, I said simply. And because I don't like seeing good people punished for trying their best. For a second, Her eyes filled with tears again, but she looked away, pretending to read the soda machine labels. I don't know what to say. Say yes, I said, or at least think about it. She let out a small laugh that trembled on the edges. Ah, yeah? I'll think about it. We exchanged numbers. I told her to call or text if she decided. When I left the hospital, the rain had stopped and the sun was breaking through the clouds. Not much, but enough to make the wet pavement shine. I drove back to the restaurant just in time for the lunch rush. My staff didn't ask where I'd been, but Cheryl shot me a knowing look. I just nodded toward the counter. Let's get moving, I said. That evening, after closing, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hi, this is Megan. I'd like to take that job, if it's still open. I smiled without realizing it. It's yours, I typed back. Come in tomorrow at 9. I didn't tell anyone about the text. Some things you keep quiet because they feel like a promise you don't want to jinx. The next morning, she showed up 5 minutes early, hair neat, eyes alert, wearing a secondhand white shirt that was too big but clean. She introduced herself to everyone, shook hands, and asked questions instead of pretending to know it all. Luis nodded in approval. Cheryl said, she's got good energy. By noon, she'd memorized the specials, handled 2 tables on her own, and made Dylan's day by sneaking him a free cookie after school. Watching her move between tables, polite but confident, I realized how different the world can look when someone finally gets a chance instead of a lecture. That night, as we closed up, she thanked me again. You didn't have to do this, she said. I know, I replied. But I wanted to. She smiled, really smiled this time. Then I'll make sure you don't regret it. And from that moment on, something quiet but steady began to change. In her, in the restaurant, and, though I didn't see it yet, in me. I always wake up before my alarm. It's a habit you pick up when you run a place that survives on early prep and late closings. The quiet hour between 5 and 6 is mine. Black coffee, the soft gurgle of the old drip machine, the street still empty outside the window. My son, Dylan, sleeps heavy until 7:30. I like that he still curls up like he did when he was little, even though he swears he's a big 4th grader now. The house carried that cool, slept-in chill. I pulled on a sweatshirt, padded to the kitchen, and set out 2 bowls for cereal. The radio on the counter hummed low. Traffic, weather, a bit of talk about a high school basketball game. I let it fill the silence because it kept my mind from going where it wanted to go. Back behind a diner, under a humming security light, to a kid trying not to fall apart where everyone throws their trash. My restaurant sits on the corner of a working-class block where the plumbing shop knows everybody's birthdays and the barber still keeps a handwritten ledger by the register. I named it Kiln Street Grill because the building used to be a ceramics shop. Brick walls, a long counter I refinished myself, booths with new vinyl that still creaks when someone scoots in. We do breakfast and lunch most days, dinner Thursday through Saturday. The menu is simple. Eggs that aren't watery, pancakes bigger than your hand, a patty melt that'll keep you full till sundown, and a roast chicken that people order twice a week when they don't feel like cooking. Nothing fancy, but we do it right. I bought it 5 years ago, right after my marriage ended, at a price that made more sense to my heart than it did to a bank. I needed something to throw myself into that didn't collapse under the weight of someone else's choices. The deal came with a roof that needed patching, a griddle that stuck if you didn't talk to it nicely, and a neighborhood full of people who would forgive a man learning in public, as long as he kept the coffee hot and told the truth. That morning, my truth was this. I was tired, but it wasn't from hours. It was from thinking about that girl, Megan, the name the owner had used, and the way she tried to apologize for existing. I've worked with enough young staff to know when someone's careless and when someone's drowning. There's a difference between not caring and caring too much. I packed Dylan's lunch, tucked a note under the sandwich like I always do. Proud of you. Be kind. He pretends to roll his eyes when he finds it at noon, but I've caught him saving the notes in his desk at home, rubber-banded together like treasures. He shuffled out at 7:32 on the dot, hair standing up like he'd stuck a finger in a socket. Morning, he grumbled. Morning, I said. You're on time. I'm always on time, he argued, full mouth, milk mustache. Then I'm proud of you twice. He ate. I brewed a second cup for the road, and we did our quiet morning dance, me rinsing mugs, him wrestling with shoelaces like they'd personally offended him. On the drive to school, he watched the rain stripe the windshield and said, not quite looking at me, did you sleep? Some, I said. He nodded like he expected that answer and turned to the window again. When I stopped at the curb, he leaned forward and looked at me for a beat longer than usual. Dad, yeah, bud. Sometimes people need help and don't know how to ask. I know, I said. I know. He hopped out, shoulder straps up, and trotted toward the double doors. I watched until he disappeared into the tide of backpacks. Then I turned the truck toward Kiln Street. The restaurant smelled like onions when I unlocked the door, which told me someone hadn't cleaned the bin as well as they promised. I flipped on the lights. The kitchen came alive in that way only a kitchen can. A chorus of clicks as gas lines opened, the clank of pans, the soft tick-tick of a pilot before the whoosh of flame. Luis, my line cook and the closest thing I have to a right hand, came in through the back bundled in a denim jacket. He's 35, a father of twins, and the reason our omelets fold like envelope corners. Morning, Jeef, he said, shrugging off the cold. We got a delivery window for the produce, 9:15 to 10, and the fryer's spitting again. It's the drain valve, I said. I'll pull it after breakfast. He studied my face like he studies a stubborn sauce. You good? I'm all right, I said. He nodded. We've worked together long enough that he doesn't push if he senses I'm still finding the words. That's the difference between good staff and family. With family, you learn each other's quiet. By 8, Cheryl had the register drawer counted and the pastry case filled with the muffins she brings from her sister's bakery. The bell over the door did its cheerful ring and the regulars rolled in. Mr. Patterson with his crossword, a lineman crew in neon jackets, a nurse on night shift who looks like she survives on our coffee alone. I moved through them with the rhythm I trust. Greetings, refills, a check on table 3's hot sauce, affixed to the wobbly chair by the window using a folded sugar packet like I've done 1,000 times. Business is an honest thing. It doesn't care about your feelings. You open the door, you give your best, you own your mistakes, and you try to leave the place better than you found it. But between orders and prep, Megan's face kept drifting back like steam on cold glass. Around 10:30, when the breakfast rush thinned and the line of tickets finally stopped looking like a paper snake, I set the spatula down and washed my hands. The fryer hissed at me like it resented my freedom. I grabbed my jacket. Headed where? Cheryl asked. Quick errand, I said. Half an hour. Luis looked up from a pan of hash like he already knew. You going to that diner? I stared at him. How'd you guess? You left here last night with a face like a man who forgot to say something, he said, flipping potatoes. Go say it. He was right. The thing about running a kitchen, you learn fast when something needs attention now or if it can wait. My guilt could not. I left Cheryl with the floor and Luis with the line and stepped back into the gray morning. The diner looked different in daylight, less forgiving. The neon sign buzzed like an insect. Inside, the coffee smelled burnt, and the floor had that oily tack under your shoes that never quite goes away no matter how hard you mop. The owner, the man in the gray suit from the night before, stood by the counter rubbing his wrist and talking to a vendor about paper goods. His name tag said Carver. He saw me, gave me a polite nod like we were strangers, and went back to his price dispute. I scanned the room. A couple of retirees splitting toast, a trucker hunched over eggs, a bored teenager pushing a broom. No Megan. I waited at the register until there was a break. Excuse me, I said when Carver turned. I was in here last night. With my son. Great, he said, the word flat as a mat. Hope everything was satisfactory. The food was fine, I said. I'm actually looking for your waitress. The young one you let go. Megan. He blinked. We don't give out former employees' information. I understand. I kept my tone even. I run a restaurant down the road. I'd like to talk to her about a position. Something tightened around his mouth. She won't be reliable for you, he said, voice going cool. Chronic lateness. Personal drama. Not my problem anymore. Maybe she's got a problem that could use a little understanding, I said. He shrugged. I gave her a job. I'm not a social worker. I could feel heat prickle the back of my neck, but I kept my voice steady. I'm not asking for her file. Just a way to contact her. No, he said, almost relishing it. If she wants to work, she'll find a way. That's what my generation did. I let the silence sit a second longer than comfortable. Then I nodded once, thanked him for his time, and stepped away. The teen with the broom hovered nearby, pretending to be fascinated by a spot under a booth. He couldn't have been more than 17. He glanced at Carver, then back at me, eyes flicking like a nervous bird. I lowered my voice. You work with her? He chewed his lip. Sometimes. Did she say where she lives? Bus line. Anything. He hesitated, looked again at Carver, then leaned a fraction closer and whispered, her mom's at Hillside Medical. Like a lot. She takes the 14 eastbound. Gets off near Pine. Thank you, I said, meaning it. He nodded without looking at me and pushed the broom along like none of that had happened. Outside, the rain had thinned to a mist. I stood under the overhang, hands on my hips, and let the air cool me down. There are men who believe the world is a ledger and mercy is a bad investment. I'm not one of them. I've needed mercy more than once. I remember every hand that pulled me across a gap I couldn't jump alone. I started the truck, checked the time, and did quick math on prep, deliveries, and the lunch wave. I could make Hillside and be back before 11:45 if the lights were kind. The engine hummed with that familiar, steady growl. I put the wipers on low and pulled into traffic. Some errands you plan. Some errands decide for you. The first week with Megan on the team felt like someone had opened a window in a stuffy room. She brought with her a kind of quiet energy that lifted the place without trying to. Not through chatter or charm, but through the way she noticed things, a table missing napkins, a coffee refill waiting, an older customer struggling with the door. Luis, who usually tested new hires with his trademark gruffness, had softened by day 2. She's got eyes like radar, he said, watching her glide between tables. Doesn't need to be told twice. That was his way of saying she's good. I try not to hover. I've learned that trust, once given, teaches faster than any rulebook. Still, I found myself watching from the kitchen doorway more than usual, not because I doubted her, but because something in her presence reminded me why I started this business in the first place. To create a space where people could breathe. She stayed late a few nights, helping Cheryl roll silverware and mop the floor, even when I told her she didn't have to. When I asked why, she shrugged. I like when things end clean, she said. Her mother's condition, though, weighed on her. Some days she arrived pale, distracted, apologizing for things that didn't need apologies. Once, I caught her in the supply closet wiping her eyes. You okay? I asked gently. Yeah, she said, her voice trembling. Just hospital bills. They're stacking up. I offered to give her more hours, and she shook her head. I don't want you to think I'm taking advantage. Megan, I said, you're working for them. That's what matters. She smiled weakly. You're a good boss. I laughed. No, I'm just trying to be the kind of boss I wish I'd had at 20. The holiday season hit early that year. By November, the restaurant buzzed with families, office workers, delivery guys, everyone seeking warmth from the cold. Megan took on the evening shifts without hesitation. She knew every regular's order by heart, remembered birthdays, refilled coffee before anyone asked. One Thursday night, as the first snow dusted the window ledge, I was helping Louise close when Megan came over with a tray of mugs. You should sit down for once, she said, half joking. I sit when the day's earned it, I replied. She smirked. So never. We laughed. Dylan, who'd been coloring at the counter, chimed in. Dad doesn't even sit at home. Smart kid, she said. That night, when I dropped her at the bus stop, she thanked me again, not for the ride, but for believing I was worth something. The way she said it hit me in the chest. A few weeks later, I noticed something new. Customers started mentioning Megan by name on our online reviews. The young waitress made us feel like family. She turned our bad day around. It wasn't just service, it was heart. I printed out one of the reviews and taped it to the kitchen fridge. That's you? I told her. She blushed. I just talk to people. Yeah, I said. And that's rarer than you think. Business picked up so much that I decided to add a new menu item for winter, Megan's fries. It started as a joke when Dylan told me hers were better than mine. But she took it seriously, experimenting with seasoning until the smell alone brought people through the door. When I finally added it to the chalkboard menu, she almost cried. You can't name food after me, she said, half laughing. Too late, I told her. They're selling out. For the first time since she started, I saw her walk into work without that invisible weight on her shoulders. She carried herself taller. Then came the week before Christmas. It was a Friday night. Packed, noisy, the kind of shift that keeps everyone running. Around 8, my phone buzzed in the office. It was Megan. I'm sorry, I can't make it tonight. Mom's being moved to intensive care. I texted back instantly. Go. Stay with her. Don't worry about the restaurant. We managed without her. Cheryl and Luis covered double shifts. Customers asked where she was, and I told them she was taking care of family. Some left tips for her anyway. That's when I realized she'd become part of their lives too. 2 days later, a nurse called the restaurant. Megan's mom had passed away. I drove straight to the hospital. When I found her sitting alone in the waiting area, her eyes were empty. Not crying, just hollow. I sat beside her, silent for a long while. Words felt useless. Eventually, she whispered. She went peacefully. I nodded. She was proud of you. I can tell. She shook her head. I don't know. I kept missing shifts, messing up. You showed up, I said quietly. That's all a parent really wants. Her voice cracked. What am I supposed to do now? You start again, I said. And this time, you don't have to do it alone. The funeral was small, just a few friends, some coworkers, a handful of neighbors. I closed the restaurant for the morning and brought flowers on behalf of the whole team. Afterward, when everyone drifted away, Megan hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for being there." I told her the truth. You remind me what this place is for. That winter, the restaurant became more than a business again. It was family, not by blood, but by choice, built one small act of kindness at a time. And though I didn't know it then, that season, the one where we both learned to start over, would become the quiet turning point of my life. Winter that year came down like a weight. The kind of cold that creeps through walls no matter how high you turn the heat. The sidewalks stayed slick with ice, and the city felt half asleep, wrapped in a gray hush. Inside Kiln Street Grill, though, we kept the lights warm and the coffee strong. The windows fogged every morning, and I liked the sight of people carving messages into the glass with their fingers, little hearts, names, reminders that warmth still existed somewhere. Megan came back to work a week after the funeral. I told her she could take as long as she needed, but she insisted. If I stay home, I'll drown, she said softly. So she came, a little paler, quieter, but determined. The first few days were rough. I'd catch her zoning out by the counter, staring at nothing, and she'd blink and apologize. I'm fine, she'd say, even when it was clear she wasn't. But grief doesn't leave quickly. It just learns to sit quieter beside you. It was late January when the heating system gave out in the restaurant. The repair guy told me the part would take a week to arrive, and I remember thinking, great, perfect timing. We ran the ovens hot and brought in 2 portable heaters just to keep from freezing. Customers still came. They brought coats, drank more coffee, and told us stories about the times they'd lost power in the winter too. There's something about shared discomfort that reminds people how to be human. One night, after closing, I found Megan standing by the window, rubbing her hands together for warmth. The streetlights outside threw pale reflections across her face. You should head home, I said, hanging my apron. She looked over, smiling faintly. And leave you to mop floors alone? Not happening. I chuckled. You're stubborn. Only when it matters, she replied. We cleaned in silence for a while. The hum of the refrigerators filled the space between us. Then, without looking at me, she said, you ever feel like life waits until you've lost everything before it gives something back? I leaned against the counter. Yeah, it's cruel that way. But sometimes what it gives back isn't what you expected. She nodded slowly. I used to think my life was supposed to follow a plan. Finish school, take care of mom, save enough to move us out of that tiny apartment. I thought if I worked hard enough, things would get better. They still can, I said. She gave a sad smile. You really believe that? I have to, I said. Otherwise I'd have closed this place years ago. She laughed quietly. Then I guess I'll keep believing too. When we finished, I walked her to the door. The air outside was sharp, cutting through our coats. She thanked me for letting her stay on the job through all of it. Megan, I said, I didn't do you a favor. You earned your place here. Her eyes glistened under the streetlight. Still, thank you. By February, the restaurant hit a stride again. Word spread about our comfort meals, the stew, the fresh bread, and those fries that everyone swore had something addictive in them. Business grew so steady I had to think about expanding staff. One afternoon, a man in a suit came in asking about catering for a corporate event. I recognized him immediately, the diner owner, Carver. He didn't recognize me at first. Heard this place does solid service, he said, looking around. We try our best, I replied evenly. Then his eyes narrowed, placing me. You're the guy who came asking about that girl. Megan, right? That's right, I said. He chuckled. So, you actually hired her? I did. And And she's one of the best employees I've ever had. He blinked, not expecting that. Well, I'll be damned. She's running the floor tonight, if you want to see for yourself. Right on cue, Megan appeared from the back, balancing a tray of drinks with practiced ease. When she spotted him, she froze for half a second, then set the tray down at another table and approached. "Mr. Carver," she said, polite but calm. "Megan," he replied, clearing his throat. "Good to see you're doing well." "I am," she said. "Thank you." He nodded awkwardly, glanced at me, and muttered something about following up on the catering later. Then he left, looking smaller than I remembered. Megan watched him go, her jaw tight. "That felt strange," she admitted. "You handled it with grace," I said. She exhaled, smiling slightly. "Guess that's growth." One evening in March, a heavy snowstorm rolled in. Streets shut down, schools closed, and we decided to stay open just for takeout and delivery. Around 9, a soaked delivery driver showed up at the door, middle-aged guy, shivering, said his car broke down 2 blocks away. We gave him hot soup and a place to warm up until the tow truck came. Megan sat with him, chatting like they were old friends. Later, when he left, she said, "I used to think small kindness didn't matter. That unless you changed someone's whole life, it didn't count." I smiled. Small kindnesses are what keep people going until the big ones arrive. She looked at me for a long moment. "That's what you did for me." I started to protest, but she stopped me. "No, really. You didn't just give me a job. You gave me back a sense of worth." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. Some gratitude you just absorb quietly. As winter faded, the first hint of spring crept through the cracks, sunlight hitting the booths in the morning, people ordering iced tea instead of cocoa. The restaurant felt alive again, humming like a living thing. One night, after closing, Megan brought me a mug of coffee and said, "You know, I think your restaurant's more than a place to eat." "How's that?" "It's where people come to remember they still matter." That one stopped me. I looked around at the chairs stacked, the clean counters, the faint smell of onions and soap, and realized she was right. Somewhere along the way, this place had become something sacred, not because of the food, but because of the people who found shelter here. And that's when I realized the truth I hadn't wanted to admit. I hadn't just saved Megan. She'd saved me right back, from the quiet loneliness I'd been living in for years. Spring always sneaks up on me. One week, you're scraping frost off the windshield, and the next, you're standing outside your own door realizing the light has changed. It's warmer, less blue, more forgiving. That's how it felt inside the restaurant, too. The regulars noticed it before I did. They'd sit at their tables and say things like, "Feels good in here lately," or, "You all smile more these days." Maybe they didn't realize it, but they were talking about her. Megan had turned the place into something I couldn't have built alone. She started decorating the counter with little vases of flowers, cheap ones, sometimes wildflowers she picked on her walk to work. She brought music on a Bluetooth speaker for the slow mornings, soft enough not to bother the older crowd. And she began talking about ideas, small things at first, like a community night, where we'd serve free soup to people from the shelter 2 blocks away. When she mentioned it, I hesitated. "You know that's going to cost us," I said. "I know," she replied, "but it'll cost less than it'll give back." She had a way of making practicality sound like faith. So we did it. One Wednesday every month, we opened the doors after hours, and whoever walked in got fed. Some nights it was 10 people, some nights 30. A retired teacher played old tunes on his guitar, Luis made jokes, and Cheryl handed out extra bread. Megan floated through it all like she'd been born for it, the heart of something bigger than herself. The first night, when the last guest left, I caught her wiping down a table and smiling to herself. "Feels right," she said. "It does," I admitted. "You've got a good instinct for this." She laughed. "Maybe I just know what it's like to be hungry for something that isn't food." That line stuck with me. A few weeks later, I got an email from a local food blog asking to feature Kiln Street Grill for our community nights. They said someone had tipped them off. I found out later it was one of our regulars, a retired fireman named Tom, who'd written a note about a small restaurant doing big things quietly. The reporter came in on a Thursday morning. Young guy, glasses, too much coffee in his hand. He asked questions while snapping photos. The grill, the chalkboard menu, even the worn cutting board I kept behind the counter. When he turned the camera toward Megan, she froze. "Don't," she said shyly. "I'm not the story." But she was. When the article came out, it spread fast. Local restaurant feeds more than customers. It feeds hope. There was a picture of our front window with the neon sign glowing against the dusk, and below it, a caption about how a young waitress and her single dad employer have turned kindness into culture. I'll admit, I felt a sting reading that line. Not pride exactly, but something deeper, the quiet awareness that life had turned a corner while I wasn't watching. We got a flood of new customers, people curious about the story. Some came for the food, others for the feeling they'd read about. And Megan, well, she handled it all with grace. She'd smile, serve, thank, and move on, never letting it go to her head. A week later, during one of our busiest nights, a man in an expensive suit walked in, silver hair, polished shoes, the type that made heads turn. I recognized him instantly. Mr. Carver, the diner owner who'd fired Megan months ago. He waited until the dinner rush slowed, then approached me at the counter. I read the article, he said. I nodded. Yeah? Guess word gets around. He looked around the place, the families eating, the soft laughter, the staff moving in sync. You built something good here. We built it, I said. Took a team. His gaze drifted to Megan, who was clearing a table with Cheryl. She's different, he murmured. She always was, I replied. He hesitated, then sighed. I was too hard on her. Didn't know about her mom. You didn't ask, I said gently, not as an accusation, just fact. He nodded. You're right. He left without another word. And maybe that was enough. A small, quiet apology carried in the way he held the door open a little longer than necessary. That weekend, we hosted our third community night. A local paper printed a small feature, and we had more volunteers than tables. I stood by the entrance, watching the laughter spill out of the dining room, and felt something shift inside me, a weight I'd carried for years without noticing. Running a restaurant, raising a kid alone, getting through divorce, it had all turned me inward, made me careful, sometimes even closed off. But standing there, watching Megan hand a bowl of soup to an old man in a worn jacket, I realized how much lighter life felt when you opened the door wider. After everyone left, I locked up and found Megan outside, sitting on the curb, sipping hot cocoa from a paper cup. The night was cool, the air sharp with the scent of rain and fried onions. You okay? I asked. She smiled. Yeah, just tired, but the good kind. I sat beside her. You've done something special here, you know. She looked down at the cup. We did. There was a long pause. The street was quiet except for the buzz of a distant street lamp. She finally said, Sometimes I think my mom would have loved this place. I think she'd be proud of you, I said. She nodded, her eyes shining in the dim light. I hope so. That was the moment I realized something I hadn't felt in years, a kind of peace that doesn't come from success or survival, but from doing something that matters quietly, without fanfare. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was carrying the world alone. By the time summer arrived, Kiln Street Grill had become more than a restaurant. It was a heartbeat in the middle of our neighborhood, one that pulsed steady, warm, and familiar. Mornings were busy with regulars who didn't need menus anymore. Afternoons brought families escaping the heat for sweet tea and pie. Evenings carried the low hum of conversation and the smell of grilled onions that drifted out onto the sidewalk. But beneath all that noise, there was something quieter happening too. Something I could only feel, not describe. Megan's laughter had become the music of the place. My son Dylan, now 10, spent his afternoons doing homework in the corner booth, and Megan always slipped him extra fries or a milkshake when she thought I wasn't looking. One evening, after closing, I found the two of them sitting at a table, heads close together, drawing something on a napkin. Dylan grinned when he saw me. Dad, look, it was a crude sketch of the restaurant, with a big sign over the door that said home. Megan blushed. He started it. I smiled. Looks about right. Then Dylan said, Megan says when people eat here, they feel like they belong somewhere. That's what you built, right? I looked at the napkin again, at the wobbly lines of the drawing, and felt something tighten in my chest. Yeah, I said softly. That's what I hoped for. But good things have a way of testing whether you deserve them. A few weeks later, a city inspector came by unannounced. Routine check, he said. Except nothing about it felt routine. He walked through the kitchen with a clipboard, snapping photos, making notes. When he left, he handed me a list of violations, half of which I knew were minor and fixable. The other half felt exaggerated. Luis whistled low as he read over my shoulder. He's gunning for someone. I nodded. Yeah, and it looks like it's me. By the next day, rumors started floating around that the diner up the road, Carver's Place, had lodged a complaint. I didn't want to believe it, but it made too much sense. Since our article, we'd drawn half his old clientele. Competition has a way of turning decent men bitter. That night, after everyone left, I sat at the counter going through the list again. My hands felt heavier than they should have. Megan came out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. What's wrong? Inspection, I said. They might shut us down for a week if we don't fix everything by Monday. Can we fix it? She asked. Yeah, but it's going to mean long hours. Maybe some all-nighters. She pulled out a chair and sat across from me. Then we do it. All of us. Megan, you don't have to. I want to, she interrupted firmly. You gave me a chance when I had nothing. You think I'm going to let someone take this place from you now? I didn't have an answer. Sometimes gratitude speaks louder than promises. That weekend, the restaurant turned into a construction site. Louise fixed plumbing and scrubbed the kitchen floor till it gleamed. Cheryl repainted the pantry shelves. Dylan carried boxes, refusing to be left out. And Megan, she organized everything. Lists, supplies, schedules, all color-coded in sticky notes across the fridge. By Sunday night, I was dead on my feet. I'd been scraping old tile grout for hours when Megan walked in with 2 paper cups of coffee. She handed me one and sat on the counter beside me, swinging her legs like a kid. Why'd you do it? She asked quietly. Do what? Help me. Back then, you didn't even know me. I stared into the cup, steam rising between us. Because I remember what it's like to be looked at and not seen. People helped me once when I didn't deserve it. I guess I've been trying to pay it forward ever since. She nodded slowly, her expression softening. Then I hope someday I can do that for someone too. You already are, I said. Every day. She didn't answer, just smiled and sipped her coffee. We worked till past midnight that night. When the morning sun broke through the windows, the place looked brand new, like we'd rebuilt it from the ground up. The next day, the inspector came back, clipboard in hand. He walked through the kitchen, silent and expressionless. Finally, he set down his pen. Looks good, he said curtly. You're cleared. I exhaled for the first time in 2 days. The moment he left, the entire crew erupted in cheers. Louise banged a spatula on the counter. Cheryl hugged Megan. And Dylan, standing on a stool, raised his juice box in a mock toast. To Kiln Street Grill, he shouted. I laughed, clinking my coffee cup against his. To Kiln Street Grill. That evening, when the rush finally died down, Megan stood by the window watching the sunset paint the street in orange and gold. You know, she said, I used to think people found strength by standing alone. Turns out, it's the opposite. I nodded. Yeah, sometimes it takes a whole lot of people to keep one person from falling apart. She turned to me then, eyes calm. Sure. Thank you for letting me be one of those people. I didn't answer right away. I just smiled and said, you earned it. But later that night, locking up, I realized how much truth sat in her words. I'd spent years running this place like a fortress, walls high, heart guarded, all in the name of control. But what she'd built, without even trying, was a family. And for the first time since my divorce, I didn't feel alone when I turned off the lights.